What's going on, guys? Welcome back to WWE Network and Show, where I, Graham G.S. and Matthews, break down all the original content I watch on the WWE Network, on Peacock, and on Vice. As today we're talking the latest episode of Dark Side of the Ring, Season 4, Episode 2, entitled Shattered, the Magnum TA story. Thankfully, all these episodes are sad in one way or another. This isn't as depressing because no one died, thankfully. Magnum TA's career was ended prematurely due to a very bad accident, as most people know. Not real wrestling fans, but anyone that knows wrestling well enough knows the name Magnum TA. And if you've only been watching wrestling in the last 15, 20 years without really, probably closer to 15 years, without going back and really, I don't watch a lot of old school territory stuff, but I know the story of Magnum TA and how his career was cut short, and not really much beyond that. So I'm glad they did an episode on him. Again, not as depressing as some other episodes, especially not as sad as last week when Chris Candido fucking died by the end of it, which was very depressing. But still, it ends on a heartwarming, nice note, which I liked. So they open up the episode talking about Hulkamania booming in the 1980s, and Hulk Hogan was the biggest thing to happen to wrestling. Meanwhile, Jim Crockett Promotions essentially serving as an alternative. We hear from Jim Cornette, who was on last week's episode. He's on a lot of these episodes. He praises the roster they had at that point, the Road Warriors, Dusty Rhodes, Ric Flair, among many others. David Crockett, who we hear from on this episode, his father was Jim Crockett Sr. He's the son of Jim Crockett Sr. He said that at that point they needed something special on the roster. And that was when, not at that time exactly, but Terry Allen, that's what the TA stands for in Magnum TA. I'm not sure I ever actually knew that. Magnum was obviously a playoff of which they get into, Magnum PI, a very, popular show at that point, starring Tom Selleck, I believe, and that was where the name came from. TA stood for Terry Allen. So he started wrestling in 9th grade, actually. He met Buzz Sawyer, who promised to train him and get him a wrestling license. He told him it was $10,000. And because Magnum's, I'll just call him Magnum, because Magnum's parents believed in his dream of becoming a wrestler, they lent him the money. The mom gave him the money, $10,000. But Sawyer left town. And in whatever year that was, the early 70s or whatever, $10,000 is a lot of money even now. I don't know how much money that would be now, but that's a lot of fucking money. He left town with that money. And we find out from Cornette that a wrestling license typically costs between $10 and $25. Not $10,000, just $10. Magnum didn't know any better, and he got fucked over, and that's the wrestling business in a nutshell, I guess. But he started training soon after with Jimmy Garvin. He joined CFW, Championship Wrestling from Florida. Dusty Rhodes saw him, and he thought that Magnum, before giving him that name Magnum TA, he saw him as the next movie star. He saw movie star potential in Magnum TA. And again, like I said, the name was inspired by Magnum PI. That's where it came from. Dusty told him, listen, they got to find the right character for him, and nothing was really working. He tried a lot of stuff. Nothing was really working or clicking. Dusty looked at him and told him, listen, go buy a motorcycle, ride that motorcycle, Harley Davidson, whatever, and adopt that personality. And he did, and it immediately changed the perception of who Magnum TA was. He became a massive star almost immediately. Women fell in love with him. Jim Crockett thought he was the complete package. We hear from his ex-wife, Magnum's ex-wife, who he was married to from 1981 to 1988, I believe. And the ex-wife at that point found pictures of other women in his bag when she would unpack his bag when he came home from trips. And she realized that it wasn't her. She would see other people, other women's bags in these pictures, and realizing that's not my bag. So he was accused of infidelity even at that point. I think that was while they were married and not before they. Even if they weren't married, that's still not good to be cheating, obviously. So he was doing that sort of stuff even then. And more on that later. But Nikita Koloff, who we hear a lot from on this episode, Nikita's great. I don't know too much about his career aside from the name itself, but he was on Tales from the Territories, and he's done a lot of, a lot of stuff on these Dark Side things, I believe, and I don't know how old he is, but he comes across great. He's very well spoken. He's awesome. He just looks like a very nice guy, too. He emerged as the next big rival for Magnum TA. They had a best-of-7 series over the NWA United States Championship, now the WWE United States Championship. Magnum lost the first 3 matches. He won the next 3, but he lost the last one to Koloff, and it was I think still regarded to this day as one of the best of 7 series in wrestling history. And Koloff and Garvin were about to have a huge match, and Magnum was in there as well, and he was on the verge of the World Championship. He was about to win that World's Heavyweight Championship. And he even talked about planning to retire from wrestling young. He thought, I can make as much money as I can be done wrestling in tights by like 30 or 40, and I can go off and do other stuff. And then that's when they get into the car accident. He recalls the car accident on that rainy night. He recaps the whole thing. And he talks about really what happened and crashing into the telephone pole, cutting it in half. That's how crazy it was. He hydroplaned because he was going pretty fast and he had a need for speed. He mentioned that here. He was going pretty fast and he went over like a hole or something. I forgot exactly what happened, but the whole thing happened really, really fast. He said that it's hard to remember exactly what happened, but he can kind of put the pieces together now. He hydroplaned, lost complete control of the car, smashed into a telephone pole, cut it completely clean in half. And at that point, he actually did not know that he wasn't okay until he realized he couldn't move. He found out of the hospital, like they had to get the jaws of life to get him out of the car. They almost pulled him out through the window, and they realized that's probably not a good idea. He found out of the hospital that he fractured his vertebrae, and that he was told at that point he'd be paralyzed from the neck down. It was extremely serious stuff. But he was such a beloved figure in wrestling at that point that he received like between 8,000 and 10,000 phone calls to the hospital, and like all these letters, and the most visited person at that hospital or attempted to, or all the letters and everything. Like, that's how popular he was at that point. And Garvin, who was a heel at that point, couldn't go to the hospital. Ric Flair and the Four Horsemen couldn't go to the hospital because they were heels, and kayfabe was still very real back then, so they would have to visit in the middle of the night. Like security would kind of have to usher them in through like a secret hallway and whatever. It was pretty top secret stuff because they didn't want to break kayfabe. But Flair snuck in there in the middle of the night one night and gave him like the big gold, the World Heavyweight Championship. And I think it was pretty clear at that point that he would never wrestle again. So wrestlers donated. He wasn't getting paid because he wasn't wrestling. So wrestlers donated part of their paychecks to him, which was really nice. Like any $25, $30 out of like 50 guys, it adds up, and it went to his hospital bills and stuff like that, which was really nice. After about 30 days of being in the hospital, that was when the introspection and the reflection kind of set in. And that was when he started to feel bad. Not really for himself, but his friends, knowing that everything was invested in him as the next big star, and he let them down because he could never wrestle again. So Koloff kind of filled in the void by teaming with Flair around that point. They became a new tag team. We hear a lot from Bill Apter on this episode. He interviewed Magnum for Pro Wrestling Illustrated, PWI. And that kind of helped get the message out there that he was okay. He appreciated the fan support, and he was really close with Bill Apter. At that point was Magnum, which is cool. So he ended up making his first appearance back in front of a crowd. I forgot exactly when, maybe a year later, a couple years later, I don't remember. But he walked to the ring, and it was an extremely big deal. Still one of the coolest things he's ever been a part of to this day that he remembers. And he wanted to still be involved in the business. It was tough because he couldn't get physical, really, and he couldn't wrestle anymore, so it's tough to still be involved in wrestling, but not wrestling. So he worked as a color commentator for a little while. The ex-wife talked about how there was some infidelity past the accident, even. He seems nice enough now, but she dedicated her entire life to, like, feeding him, dressing him, getting him around when he was completely incapable of doing so himself. And he was still, I guess, guilty of infidelity even then, she said. So they divorced soon after. We find out that Jim Crockett Promotions was bought out by Ted Turner, WCW. I don't know if he had a job in WCW. They don't really talk about that. He ended up moving on to other things. He left the wrestling business, and he still wonders what if about his career when asked about it. I don't know if he was involved in WCW. I don't think so. But he's in a good place now, he says, and he remarried with a new family. We hear from his new wife, and they seem to be very close, and they've been close since they first married in 1997. He's very thankful for the life that he has now, and that was kind of the note they ended on, along with other stuff, but that was the general consensus. Really good stuff here. Again, I knew about Magnum TA and his accident and his career being cut short. I didn't know the details about certain stuff and where he is now, what he was doing now, and the exact nature of the accident and how much it really did affect his life, even beyond his career. So I really liked this episode. It was a good, solid second episode of the season. Not nearly as heavy as the Sonny and Chris Candido stuff, but which was good. You need kind of a breather, and it's nice to have an episode end every once in a while on a positive note, so I like that. So good stuff here. Shattered, the Magnum TA story episode right now on Vice's Dark Side of the Ring. Check it out. I don't know what next week's is on. I missed that one. I'm not sure what that episode's going to be about, so we'll find out soon. It's a quick Google search, but I don't have it in front of me, so whatever. But thank you guys for checking out my review. I appreciate it. Be sure to like the video, drop a comment, share the video, and subscribe to the channel for more daily content. Check out all my other Dark Side of the Ring reviews of every episode of the season, or rather the show even. So far, all 4 season reviews down below in the description box, so check that out. Have a great one, guys. I'm Graham G.S. Matthews, and I'll catch your ass down the road.